All right, so developers, we've talked about declaring functions and returning a value from a function. But in a function, you have an opportunity to pass data into a function as well. So let's start off by here in our 102 file, 102 functions and parameters. We're going to declare a function called a classic function called add numbers. Okay, and so add numbers, I'm just going to stub this out. Let's see here. What I want to do is I want to have a result of me adding numbers. And that result by default, because I'm setting up a default, is simply going to have a value of 0. And then I'm going to return that result. So right now I'm not doing any addition at all. What I've simply done is I've set up a function called add numbers. And here it is. That's going to return a result. So if I execute the add numbers function, if I invoke the add numbers function, I get that number, 0. Now, what do I want to add? When I execute a function, so here are the two things that we're going to discuss. One, it's called arguments. What are the arguments? Arguments are going to be, if I say var my result, here I am adding numbers. The things that I pass into a function. So what does it mean to pass to a function? It means the things that you put inside of these parentheses when I invoke it. When I invoke the function, I have an opportunity to pass it arguments. So here's one argument, singular, the number 2. If I wanted to pass it two numbers, I can pass it a second number. I separate the arguments with a comma. So it's not with a space, because that's just bad syntax. You get an error, and you get this little tiny error that says, hey, look, it even tells you it expected a comma. So you put a comma there. So this is what it looks like to pass two arguments. And the arguments that I'm passing is 2 and 5. If I hit save there, you'll see that my result is unchanged because I have not taken into account the 2 and the 5. Notice that these numbers 2 and 5, they're not even declared variables, right? They don't show up anywhere in my graph. Control-Shift-I to get it back, my developer tools. They're not logged. They're just hard-coded arguments that are being passed to the function called add numbers. So when I invoke the function, that's my opportunity to pass you arguments. So I pass into the function arguments. When I am inside the function now, if I want to refer back to those arguments, we call those things parameters. So in here, I have an opportunity to name parameters. And in fact, I can name, let me just name one parameter, call it number 1. And let's console.log number 1. So that we can see in the console that the value of the first argument is being now referred to as the first parameter, the parameter being named number 1. Let me start, instead of calling it number 1, let me call it the first number. Okay, so there's the first number. It's the 2. If I switch these around and I passed 5, 2 instead, the first argument becomes the first parameter, and now it's 5. So by changing the order of these particular arguments, we are, let me go in here, and now I've added 3 arguments. By changing the order of the arguments, we change what first number is referencing, because the first number, the first parameter is going to be the first argument that is being passed. All right. Now, this name here means absolutely nothing to the software. To the computer, that name means absolutely nothing. we give these parameters, like our variables and like our functions, a meaningful name for us, human beings. But the name does not matter. We got first number, that's what's getting logged. And this doesn't even have a variable name associated with it. Now, if I wanted to see the second number, I would simply say second number. And let's console log these guys together. I'm going to wrap curly brackets around it, so I only have one console log coming out. And I can see that the first number is 5 and the second number is 2. Why is that the case? It's because the second argument that I passed was the number 2. And the third argument that I passed was 25. Now, 25 is not even referenced here, right? Let's break this out so I can see this. Let's break this out so I can see this in one line. I'm console logging an object that has these two properties, first number and second number. There's their values. 5 and 2 are being logged. Notice 25 is not being logged. Let me change this to something else. I'm going to say 88. 88 is not being logged because I am not logging the third number. Here's that third number. And now let me log it down here, comma, third number. Now we're going to see that we have the three numbers, 5, 2, and 88. Again, if I were to take this 88 and make it the first argument, because it's the first argument, it becomes the first parameter. The second argument is the second parameter, and then the third argument is the third parameter, so forth and so on. Okay, so here we are, 88, 5, and 2. Interestingly enough, I don't have to pass it three things. So this is one of the frustrating things about, in fact, I don't have to pass it anything. A feature, a bug, again, you might have different camps on this. Depending on the day, I definitely feel like this is a nice little thing. It's kind of cool. It makes JavaScript flexible. I don't have to pass it any arguments simply because the function is declared and declares three parameters. The name and the number, the quantity of parameters that the function chooses to name, it does not keep you from calling that function with either 0 parameters, the same number of parameters, or calling the function with no arguments, right? So I can pass this 0 arguments, I can pass it 1 argument, and it comes out good, no problem. I can totally do that, and it's totally fine. It's legit. There then becomes a question, though, if I'm expecting a second number in here, and I try to do something with the second number in here, I might get an error. So, for example, if I'm expecting 2 numbers, and let me just pass in 2 numbers here, 900 and the number 8, and I want to say that my result is equal to, let's just say first number, and I'm going to add the second number. If I do that, we're going to see now that my result, here's my result, is 908, right? That's cool. That's fantastic. From the developer bar here, from the command line, let me execute add numbers. But let me not pass it anything. Let's see what happens. We get not a number, okay? One of those other keywords that is implied. I tried to do something in the world of math, but I yielded not a number. And that's when you have basically a math error. If I want to pass it just one value, nothing. Again, because I'm trying to add, I end up trying to add undefined to the number 8, and that yields not a number. That's really unfortunate. Super interesting, again, that you need to remember. In JavaScript, I don't have to pass it I don't have to pass it any arguments. Even though there's 3 parameters defined, I don't have to pass it 3 arguments. I could pass it 3 arguments, so I can say 3, 2, 8, right? And that's totally fine. Now I get 7 because I'm only adding the first 2 numbers. If I wanted to, for some reason, if I'm compelled, I could say, look, that second argument, I'm going to pass it as null. And this is going to yield again. Oh, so null turns out that if you add 2 to null, you have 2. Interesting feature of JavaScript, that the null essentially has gone through type coercion, and null gets coerced into the number 0. Let's see if this is the same for the undefined keyword. Undefined is not a number. And if you want to go down a rabbit hole, do not do this actually. But there's a nice little rabbit hole that would actually explain to you why null actually gets considered as 0. If I misuse this and I pass in not a number but a string, let's see what happens. I actually get 2 hello, because what happened was that the number 2 got added to the string hello, and instead of trying to do math, what it did was string concatenation. It concatenated the number 2, turned it into a string, and gave us 2 hello. So here we are passing to a function 3 arguments, and naturally I could be adding the 3 numbers here, right? There's my third number, and let's see what happens. My add numbers are still going to work. But again, because the third number is undefined, my result of saying 908 turns out to be undefined, so I'm going to say null. And so null comes back with number 8. Well, here's null, 908. I could, all right, I could write some logic in here, right? So we're going to combine some of the things that we've been learning. Let's do this. We're going to set up our 0 as our default, as I had tried to do before. Right, and here, so I don't have to even wait for that thing, I'm going to console log my result. And by the way, I don't even have to put this inside of a variable, right? I could directly, if you see here, inside of this parentheses, what I'm going to pass, right? So I'm skipping over the assignment of a variable. I'm going to pass 1, 2, and 3. And then I'm going to, again, skip over. I'm going to say undefined and 10. Okay. So what I want to see coming out of here, we see all the 3 different logs, right? We see the 3 different logs coming out of our function. What's being logged is the result, and everything is coming back with 0. Okay, so let's start trying to put some intelligence in this function. We're going to combine some if statements. So I want to make sure that when I add 908 and null, this is actually, I'm going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to come back with just 3 logs. My result is undefined. My result is undefined. Actually, let me come back with these 2 guys. This one's to null. This one's to null. No, I actually needed that one. All right, so I need that one because this is my third one. So what I want to say is my result is equal to 0. Okay, so I'm going to write this very verbose. I can do, I can leverage truthy and falsy behavior and say if I have a first number, then result, I'm going to use now this operator. I'm going to say result plus equals first number. So that means I am going to conditionally add the first number to the result. And so in this case, I'm going to have 900, 1 and 1, 900, 1 and 1, because if I did pass it a number, it's going to add it. And I'm going to test this. I'm going to test the opposite now. So if I do add a number here, it's going to add it, and I'm going to get back to 587. If I don't pass a number, I don't error, which is cool, and I get back my 0. So here I am leveraging truthy and falsy behavior. Next, I'm going to say if type of, I'm going to use now my type of operator. If the type of is a number, I am going to take my result and I am going to do the plus equal sign, which is the assignment and addition operator, and I'm going to add that second number to my result. All right. Now, the last one, I can say if I've done the third number and I've done falsy, truthy here, and now I can leverage falsy, truthy as well down here for now. I want to do this around my third number. So there's my third number. So now, using my if statements, again, I've exercised defensive programming. I've kept my code from throwing exceptions and actually from bad behavior. I now have a function that I can pass it here 2 numbers. I can pass it 3 numbers and it's fine. I can pass it a number undefined in, then a number in 11 and get something back. So it doesn't matter how I interact with this function now. I'm always going to get a valid number back. Here are the objects that I've passed. Let me clear this up. And I can totally mess with this and pass it 3 nulls. And then as a fourth argument, pass it 0. And notice that it doesn't even care about that fourth argument because right now we're not considering it. It did an error. I hit up arrow and I'm going to pass it. Actually, I'm going to pass it undefined, 100 and then 9. And because of that, it skipped this falsy truthy check. It found that I did pass it a number here, and then it found this. Now, I have a slight little bug potentially, and this is then just depending upon how I intend for this function to be used. And if I hit execute here, what am I going to get? I'm trying to add undefined, the string 100, and then the number 9. Let's see what happens. I get the number 9. Okay. Now, why do I get the number 9? I get the number 9, or I actually get 09 because what I ended up doing is concatenating the number 0 to the string 9. That's not what I wanted. So what I'm going to do now is there's actually a global function called number that if I invoke it and pass it a string, it's going to give me back a number. And in doing so, if I hit up arrow, I am now going to get the number 9. Because when the code reached this point, it said, as long as it's truthy, which a string is, right? It's not doing a type check. Because when we got to this chunk, when we got to the 100 did a type check on the number. And it found it to be a string. So it didn't go into this result. It only did a truthy falsy check here. So, hey, I got something. But we wanted to be extra safe. And let's say, hey, you know what? Let's pass it to the function called number first before we try to do the addition. And so that ensures that this argument or this parameter, that we're only considering the parameter as a number. And because of that, I was able to add 0 and 9 and get 9. If I manipulated this inappropriately and for some reason I did 9a, then what we're going to see is not a number, because when we execute the number function and we pass it, again, 9a, doesn't matter if it's uppercase or not, we get not a number. So that's not cool. And so we got a number, not a number, and we passed it that. Okay, so then that's the situation, and we got the result. So here we are again. Let's review now. So this is us losing more logic based on the parameters that are being passed to us. These parameters, right, are directly related to the arguments that are being passed to us when we invoke the function. Let me throw a curveball out for you. I'm going to declare a variable. In fact, you know what? I've chosen to declare a variable var first number, var second number, and var second number, and then var third number. I'm even going to get rid of this stuff so that we can look at this a little bit better. We're going to leave the console log there. Okay. So let me, here's my curveball. Ready? my first number is 100. My second number is, we'll call it 50. And my third number is just the number 3. All right. So if I hit add numbers and I hit enter, we're going to notice. So then this is now a conversation that's bleeding into scope, which is another video. But I want to illustrate something before we talk about scope. I wanted to talk about naming variables, naming parameters, naming arguments. When we get into this function here, and we see this first number and this first number, look, even VS Code, as I highlight this, it's going to highlight every instance of the word first number. And it highlights, all the first numbers in here. It highlights the parameter, but it also highlights the variable. Here's the variable on the page. It actually has a value. First number is actually a global variable. It's global. But because we are in here, and because the precedence, the order in which the function is going to consider, the order in which and the areas in which the function looks for declared variables, declared parameters, it first considers things that are declared locally. So for example, here, this is a locally declared variable as opposed to a global declared variable. If you look at this first number, you might be inclined to say, oh, first number is equal to 100. But it's not, because first number here is not pointing to, right? First number there is not pointing to the global variable. First number is pointing to the parameter. And so I'm just going to draw this literally for you, because as the function, when the code is executing here, top down, when it finds this object, it actually does, hey, do I know this object? Is it declared? Yes, it's declared. Okay, what's the value? But wait, where is it declared? Is it declared up here in this area? No, it's not declared up there, because the first thing that it does is it looks for stuff that was locally declared. And in that scope, in that area, it's either going to be this guy, and wait, these names don't match, so that's not actually applicable. So what it does actually find is this name. That name of that parameter behaves like a locally declared variable. Second number is actually looking at here, and the third number is looking here to the value that was passed either as first, second, or third. The values that were passed as the first parameter, or the value that was passed as a second parameter, or the value that was passed as the third parameter. That's what these particular names point to, okay? That's what they look at. They do not come over here. That's not what happens. That's not how it works. How it works is that because it finds that name locally as a parameter, it uses the value there. So more complications. If I say add numbers, and I say first number here, and then second number there, and then third number here, right? What am I going to see? I am actually still console logging here. All right, good. Here's what I want you to look at. When I hit save, we're going to look at and we're going to discuss what shows up in the console log. The first number is 100, the second number is 50, and then the third number is 3. That makes sense because the first number here is 100. First number, second number, 50, second number 50, third number here, it's 3. Okay, that's cool. All right, what's going to happen now though? I'm only passing one number, and that number here, according to my global variable, is the value of 3. When I look at it, inside of the function is now assigned first number the value of 3. Why did that happen? First off, let me clear off some confusion. The name of the parameters have nothing to do with the name of the arguments, right? So this naming convention that you're going to be inclined to do, to say that, hey, if this guy wants the first number, I'm going to declare the thing that I passed in there as first number. Don't ever do that. Do not ever do that until you fully 110% understand how arguments and parameters work. Don't ever do this. Don't name because this guy says first number, you're going to declare a variable first number and you're going to use that. Don't ever do that until you have mastered the behavior that we're looking at right now. The number 3 shows up here as the first number. The number 3 shows up here and is being logged as the first parameter because it is the first argument. It only goes off position. The first argument becomes the first parameter. The second argument, which I'm now going to use as first number. So I got first, that, and then second. Now these guys are all mixed up. But whatever I'm passing in as the first number here, this variable holds 100, is going to be considered the second parameter. And we can see it here. The second number, which with a capital U, even poorly misnamed, 50, is now going to be considered the third one. This strictly goes off the position. The order in which I pass the arguments is the order in which they get named as parameters. Again, for illustrative purposes, the names, so I'm going to say 3 random letters, right? So I got Y, I got X, and then I got C. The names mean nothing. The names mean absolutely nothing. They mean nothing to the computer. They mean nothing to the validity and how the functions behave. They mean everything to us, right? So these numbers before, as I've named them, they might not mean anything, but it might say let's just say my salary, and then your salary. I'm a senior, you're a junior, and then we have an intern salary. Don't ever let yourself get paid this little. But now that I've given these guys maybe better names, maybe now we can start to think about this add numbers function is maybe an adding of salaries, right? And so this gives us a lot of meaning, right? If you just saw this function with these argument names, you might think, okay, this is somehow calculating maybe the company's total payroll, right? And again, we're not seeing the value being output here because we're not console logging. So var total is equal to that. And let me console log the total so we can actually see the total in the console. So here's the total in the console. And the total is going to be 153. Okay, good, because we all have numbers. These numbers now, right, is giving us a lot of context. And for us human beings, hey, this means something now. A moment ago, when again, this was A, maybe that was that, and that was C, A, B, C, this means nothing. This, by looking at this, doesn't really give us too much context. Even worse, let me go back and change this to T. This doesn't give us any context, but it still works. So the logic you might have inside your function might be totally and completely sound, and it's totally cool. The naming of the parameters, the naming of the arguments matters all day, every day. For the sake of understanding and solidifying in your mind how arguments get translated into parameters, do not name your arguments and the variables that you use in your arguments the same as you use in your parameters, okay? Even if you have to go to the place, let's just say I had a function. Let me come up with another function. Let me just come up with a function that says get pet. So I'm going to have pet name, and I'm going to have pet age, right? If for some reason this was my function, and forget about what happens. This is not important what's going on inside the function. If I wanted to say var p var p for pet. Here's my get pet. If I really wanted to pass two things to this guy, you might be inclined to pass in var pet name is Greg. I've named them after me. I actually had a dog. Let me honor my little doggy. I had a Rocky. And then pet age. My poor little Pitty. He grew up to be something like 15 years old. So Rocky's 15. I could pass it these two things here. Right? And let's just say just because I want to show you that I'm going to console log now the pet name. That's all this guy's going to do. It's going to console log pet name. So there's Rocky. Let me take the other console out for my total. And I'm going to completely clean this up so that you see nothing but Rocky, so we can focus on Rocky. If you have this situation where you have a function, you have a parameter, you have another parameter, you've given them meaningful names because you intend for this to give you back an object that represents a pet, where the pet has a name and the pet has an age. Do not do this. Do not name the arguments the same thing as the parameters, because in your mind you're going to start thinking that this name and this name means something to this name, and it doesn't. It means absolutely zero. So if you have to do something as silly as saying name pet and just reversing, right? Or Rocky age, whatever it is, you're going to see that Rocky's still coming out beautifully, right? And let's say Rocky, let me put curly brackets around that, and pet age. Pet age. Now we see Rocky. Not pet age. Pet age. Everything is getting logged wonderfully, right? So this is what we were shooting for, right? This pet that has a Rocky and age. And you should get used to the fact that, because when you look at this, it's not going to make sense to you, right? This doesn't make sense. Rocky age is being passed as pet name, but it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what you pass as far as the values. They're going to get, pet name is going to get assigned 15. There it is. Pet name gets assigned 15. Why? Pet name, it's getting assigned the value of 15. It's actually, you could say it, I prefer that you might even say it, the pet name receives the value of 15. Pet name receives the value of 15 because it was the value of 15 that was passed as the first argument. Okay? So first argument becomes the first parameter. Second argument becomes the second parameter, so forth and so on. I've shown now, and I've demonstrated to you passing strings and numbers. You could, if you wanted to, var, I'm going to declare Rocky out here now as an object that has a name, that has a value of this variable, and has an age as a value of rock age, right? So there's my particular object. And what if I just change this guy name to output pet? So I'm going to output the pet. I'm going to pass Rocky as just a pet. Now see, because I named this guy Rocky, I'm just going to put a pet, and I'm going to console log a pet. So my function output pet, lowercase output pet receives a pet, and it's simply going to console log that pet. There's no return statement coming out here. I'm going to get rid of my other variables because we don't need to see them. They don't need to be mucking up my space. Name pet doesn't show up. Oh, I actually needed them. I need a name pet. I need a rock age. But I'm logging now within line 60. I click. And in line 60, I'm logging a pet. In the console, it shows as an object. All right. Now, this Rocky dude, check out Rocky. Here's Rocky, 15. Okay. Watch what I'm going to do now so I can clear, I'm going to clear this stuff up. Yeah, I cleared all that noise up, and now I only got output pet, and I'm outputting Rocky. I wanted to show you something really important. Let me get rid of T. I am passing to my function called output pet this object called Rocky. Here's Rocky, actually. Boom. Right? Within the function, because what happens here, within this function, I am going to say a pet that age is 0. Now let's see what happens to Rocky over here on the right-hand side. You notice that the age of Rocky now turns to 0. Why is that? Because when I invoke this function called output pet, what I'm doing is that I'm not passing the value, I'm not passing a copy of this object. I am literally passing the pointer. So this a pet, and this is valid for the object reference, this a pet object is literally a pointer to the value that Rocky points to. So let's see here. We'll be drawing this. Here comes Rocky over here and over here, right? It's the same guy, points to this dude. But when I execute this function and I get to this line, a pet, because it doesn't get a copy of the object, it actually gets a pointer to the same object. When I manipulate this property called age, I'm actually manipulating this property here. Okay? And that's what happens with reference types. So really important. So when I pass in a reference type as a parameter, when I pass it as an argument and I receive it as a parameter, when I manipulate this object using this variable, using this parameter, using this pointer points back to the original object that exists in memory. To the original object that exists in memory. And so anytime I manipulate this object like I'm doing here, I'm actually manipulating the original object that was passed to me, because what was passed to me was not a copy, it was a pointer to the original object. All right, so that is us now passing arguments. You pass arguments. You pass the arguments when you invoke. You pass the arguments when you call. You pass the arguments when you execute. As a function, you receive the parameters. All right? And the order in which the parameters get, the order in which you receive the parameters is the order in which the arguments are passed to you. Play with that. Write a bunch of functions. Play with the number of parameters that you're being passing to yourself. Console log a bunch of stuff before we move on to the next video.